Hi, welcome to Econolicy Africa's Competition Women's Series. Econolicy Africa is an African-focused blog that brings you content on economics and the state of policy implementation in African markets. Today, I have a wonderful panel of ladies from the Competition and Consumer Authority in Botswana, and we'll be discussing competition and consumer protection in Botswana. This is the fourth of the series that we've been hosting. We've spoken to South Africa, Mauritius, and Nigeria. Welcome, ladies. It's great to have you for this discussion. Thanks for tuning in. I'd like you to please introduce yourselves. I'll start with Ms. Ndubiwa.
Thank you for having provided an opportunity for us to interact with you today. My name is Bonyana Ndubiwa. I am a manager responsible for policy and research. I have 12 years experience in competition space, having joined the authority at its inception in 2011. I have over 15 years experience in the consumer protection space because I previously worked for the Ministry of Trade and Industry, working in the Department of Consumer Protection. I hold a master's degree in international business. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ndubiwa, for that introduction. Ms. Dladla, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Olu and your colleagues. My name is Ms. Nomathemba Dladla, and I serve as the Director of Mergers and Monopolies here at the Competition and Consumer Authority of Botswana. I started my career in South Africa at the Competition Commission of South Africa. I did a 3-year stint before finally joining the CCA at the end of 2017. So I've been in this position of director for 5 years and thoroughly enjoying it. I think it's been an amazing journey for me. I hold a master's degree in economics from the universities of Stellenbosch and Amsterdam, and an honors degree from the University of Cape Town. It's really a great pleasure to get this platform, and I believe this is the beginning of greater things to come for women in the space in Africa. Thank you, Olu.
Thank you for that introduction. Ms. Tseladikae.
Good afternoon. I am Goitsemodimo Tseladikae. I am the Manager Legal Services here at the Competition and Consumer Authority Botswana. I have been with the Competition and Consumer Authority Botswana for 7 years now. I joined the authority in 2016. It's been a great journey. It's quite an interesting space and area to be working in. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for that introduction. And last but not the least, Ms. Modungwa.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Goitseone Modungwa. I am the manager responsible for investigations, both cartel conduct and abuse of dominance. I am a certified forensic investigation professional, and currently I'm pursuing a master's degree in competition and economic regulation. I have been with the authority since its inception, and the journey has been so good so far. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, ma'am. So before going into the questions, I'd like to issue a quick disclaimer that the views we express here are not the official position of the organizations that we're employed by. So let's get into the questions. I hope you ladies are ready. The first question is, the Competition and Consumer Authority of Botswana implements both the Competition Act and the Consumer Act of 2018. As a young entrant to the competition space, how has the CCA prioritized enforcement activities to make the most impact for the people of Botswana? I'll start with Ms. Modungwa.
Thank you very much, Olu, for that great question. The as we might be all aware that developing countries are characterized by limited resources, being financial and technical resources. So as a young entrant, the Competition and Consumer Authority had to prioritize its enforcement activities targeting certain sectors. And those sectors were selected based on their economic importance their economic importance, and also based on the greatest public interest and the impact that can arise from the anti-competitive practices. So some of the sectors that we actually prioritize include the retail sector, the poultry sector, construction sector, and the energy sector. And then the authority also went on to prioritize in terms of its enforcement activities in those sectors. And you find that initially priority was on conducting market studies or sectoral studies, just to have an appreciation of how the market structure, market dynamics, and any regulations that may impede or facilitate anti-competitive conduct in those markets. So, and then following the findings of those studies, the authority went on to provide further intervention using soft form enforcement in the form of advocacy. Like, I'll give an example of the construction industry. I don't know if I mentioned this. Construction industry is one of the sectors that actually the authority prioritized. One of the study findings was that of an exclusive arrangement between the state-owned power generating and distributing authority and one of the lead cement producers in Botswana, which the authority intervened after assessing and finding that actually it had it was exclusionary in its nature. So the parties undertook to cease and desist from engaging in that exclusionary conduct, thereby allowing other cement producers access to the input, the input that is used in the production of cement. That input was fly ash, which is a residue of coal combustion, the combustion that happens during the production and generation of electricity. So those were the sectors that the authority prioritized to channel its interventions, considering the limited resources that the authority has. I will stop there. Thank you all.
Thank you for that response. Ms. Ndubiwa, would you also like to add to that question?
Yes, although I think she has said it all, but I just wanted to quickly respond to your observation that the Competition Authority of Botswana is a young entrant to the competition space. Although I don't know what you are referring to when you are saying young, I just wanted to clarify that the Competition and Consumer Authority has 12 years in the space of competition enforcement, because it was established in 2011 through the Competition Act of 2009. The one of 2018 is basically an amendment act. Okay. The authority is fairly new in the enforcement of the Consumer Protection Act, because it is only 4 years old in this space and really has just actually started the enforcement part. We don't have much experience in terms of cases that will be coming from the consumer space, because we are fairly new in the space. Now, as my colleague has said, we have adopted the prioritization strategy or framework that lays down the criterion for directing the limited resources the authority has, as she said, to the areas where it will make the greatest impact in the economy. So we have adopted this framework, and like many other young authorities in developing countries, we have a very much constraint of limited resources because we are largely funded by the government. So we are limited in terms of engaging in a lot of activities that we could otherwise wish to have engaged in because of that. So we are following this prioritization strategies, like as my colleagues has just said. But I just wanted to add that in terms of the measure assessment, the Competition Act makes it mandatory for major transactions to be notified. However, the law further sets thresholds of notification. This greatly helps the authority to focus its limited resources on major transactions that has the potential to pose the greatest harm to the economy. So we try by all means to prioritize all of our interventions because of these constraints that we have on the resources. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that, Ms. Ndubiwa. So we'll go to the next question, and it's about the CCA's consumer rights focused approach to the protection of consumers. And I read about the right to safety. The CCA considers the right to safety, right to information, the right to choose, the right to be heard. So Ms. Tseladikae, how do this feature in the way the CCA approaches various anti-competitive conducts, and what elements are covered in the CCA's mandate in enforcing and investigating these consumer protection violations?
Thank you for the question. Let me first clarify, or not clarify, but let me first point out that while the Competition Authority enforces both the Consumer Protection Act and the Competition Act, the investigations are done by two separate units, such that investigators who do competition investigations don't do consumer protection investigations. However, this investigators or units are under one department. This distinction in investigations, I would say, takes into account the fact that while we deal with consumer welfare, the statutes deal with it at different levels or angles to some extent, such that the Consumer Protection Act deals with consumer rights at an individualized level, and the Competition Act protects consumer welfare at a market level by ensuring that markets are fair. And now, having said that, you have pointed out the different elements or provisions of the Competition Act. I will focus mainly on the right to information because I believe we have more cases on that. So in terms of the Competition Act, the Consumer Protection Act, the consumer has the right to information regarding goods and services. And currently that is the crux and the focus of our strategy, to have an informed and knowledgeable consumer. We believe that an informed and knowledgeable consumer will be in a position to ensure that they get fairness out of the markets that they engage with suppliers in. This is so because an informed consumer makes informed decisions when they are making their choices in the goods that they purchase. We are therefore currently focusing on advocacy more than anything to ensure that we have a knowledgeable consumer a vigilant consumer, a consumer who can ask the relevant questions when they are purchasing or engaging with suppliers in any manner. We believe that there should be a transparency in information to consumers, because where there's transparency in information that consumers have, it gives them the ability to compare both prices and quality of goods, such that they are able to switch between suppliers where there isn't enough quality or the prices are just not right for them. In that regard, to some extent, they do control the fairness in the markets. So that I will say is the linkage between the consumer protection and the competition side of our investigation. If a knowledgeable consumer will be in a position to control the quality of goods that they are given and the price that they buy such goods at. With that said, we came to this focus on a knowledgeable consumer and a knowledgeable consumer and the right to information on the basis of the number of cases that we're spending under the investigations department with regard to misleading information and false advertising in cases that we were receiving. We realized that a lot of the time, the cases that we receive are mainly based on that consumers purchased or engaged service providers without enough information on the goods or services that they were being given. So if we can grow our consumers to ask certain questions, to be able to engage in what they are being given, to be able to engage in what they are purchasing, then we will be able to correct certain aspects of the markets that we are currently dealing with. I'll give two examples of the markets that we are currently more focused on, or we are forced to focus on truly because of the complaints that we receive. Currently, the major cases and investigations that we have are on used vehicles, which are mostly imported, and electronics. With regard to the used vehicle market, most of these vehicles are generally really imported from outside Botswana, and there's limited information available to consumers. Half the time they are buying the vehicle on the basis of information that is provided by the supplier. You buy a vehicle on the basis that it's 3 years old or 2 years old, but in actual fact it's way older than that. So if consumers can be able to ask for such, not ask actually, demand such information on these used vehicles and understand the grade of the vehicle that they are purchasing. Most of them will not even purchase these cars. And it will on its own, the provision of such information will on its own eliminate market players who are actually inefficient and benefiting at the expense of efficient market players at the expense and or detriment of consumers. The second one is with regard to electronics. We find that there's an influx of different grades of electronics, more especially cell phones in the country. You purchase a cell phone under the belief that it's brand new, but in actual fact, it's a refurbished cell phone. Such information is not available to consumers. We therefore need to be pushing, or we are pushing to a point where a consumer can be able to ask, is this a brand new phone? Is this a used phone? Or is this a refurbished phone? And how to demand and or ask what specifically they should ask for in cases where they have suspicions that the cell phone that they have been sold is refurbished, used, and not necessarily brand new. So if we believe that once we have such information available to consumers, both in the electronic market and in the used vehicle market, the number of cases that we are currently dealing with will go down. There is a lot more of other markets that we are seeing this lack of information to consumers, but these two specific markets are the ones that we currently are fully dealing with, and there's so much going on in those markets. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. I guess as a follow-on to that, I was just going to say that I think Botswana is at the forefront of this, and it's becoming a global issue, the issue of deceptive marketing and consumers not having enough information to make the right decisions. And I think certain markets are even less opaque and they are not easy for consumers to navigate. So this is a very important aspect of work that I hope that other African competition authorities can also focus on. So next, I would like to hand over to my co-presenter for today, Balisa Mambi. Balisa is a team participant, a team player, team lead with Econolicy Africa, and she'll be asking the next set of questions. So Balisa, over to you. Thank you.
Refreshing perspectives. For this next question, I will ask Ms. Dladla to come in on it. So we understand that measures may, in some cases, enhance efficiency, but in some major cases, they do raise competition concerns. Maybe if you can take us through factors that CCA would consider in identifying those measures that raise competition concerns. And then you can also reflect to a particular measure case that was not allowed due to its negative impact on competition. Thank you. Ms. Dladla, over to you.
You're muted, Ms. Dladla.
Thank you, Balisa. Sorry, I wasn't aware that I'm muted. I think first and foremost, it's important to highlight that our merger assessment rests on two fundamental principles. The first principle is that of substantial lessening of competition, SLC. And a secondary principle, but equally important, is public interest. Now, the first test in merger assessment is that of SLC. This means every assessment has to undergo a rigorous SLC test, for which we currently have a framework encapsulated within our merger guidelines. Now, it's not every merger that would be taken through such scrutiny. It obviously depends on the type of merger that you're dealing with. What we've seen in our markets, in Botswana's context, is that there's a high volume of non-complex mergers. And these non-complex mergers are usually conglomerate mergers. In other words, there is no relationship between the acquirer and the target. However, where we really have to pay particular attention, especially because of the nature of markets traditionally in Botswana, is where we have horizontal mergers. In a case of a horizontal merger, we have to really subject the assessment through rigorous scrutiny. One, we need to confidently say and decide what the status of competition is going to be post-merger. So in other words, once these two companies come together, what is the degree of effective remaining competition? That's a very a core principle in the assessment of SLC. Now, what this means is that you really need to look at the market holistically by looking at domestic players as well as imports, by looking at whether or not the particular market you're looking at has got imports that are coming in a way that these imports can impose or pose a competitive constraint on local competition. That's number one. The second principle that we'd look at is that of countervailing power, right? To what extent will the customers of the merging parties have bargaining power post-merger? And in most cases, where customers lose bargaining power is where the merger becomes or leads to dominance of the merging parties in a way that whatever effective remaining competition is not strong enough to discipline the merging parties. So that leaves the customers of the merging parties wanting because they don't have enough alternatives to play against when bargaining for prices and other supplementary services. And so there exists this framework which basically acts as a guide during merger assessment. But like I said, we don't just look at SLC, we also look at public interest. There are instances where, the impact on the welfare or public interest is so strong that even though there's SLC, because of the strong impact on the public or public interest, we can end up approving a transaction on the basis that we set very strong conditions that will deal with the public interest element. We have indeed in the past dealt with a transaction where there was clear SLC, there was dominance in this particular market, but the target entity employed over 300 employees, and had we rejected the merger, that would have meant those 300 employees lost their jobs. So we allowed the merger to go through. However, we supplemented that approval with a structural remedy being a divestiture. So we said, we allow you for the next 3 years to get into this market, but after 3 years, you need to have made plans to exit this market where you have a strong presence. Have we rejected any mergers in the past? Yes, we have. One such merger that we rejected, Olu and Balisa, is a merger in the securities market. We had one of Botswana, in fact, not one, it was the biggest player in the securities market, acquiring a very close competitor. Now, this was around 2013, where the market was still young, where the market for security was still growing. We were starting to see an interest from local citizen-owned firms. And we thought, if we allow this merger to go through, there's going to be very negative detriment to, a potential entrant. So we rejected the merger. And true to our word, a few years later, as we would normally do, to test whether or not the decision that we had made was the right decision, we conducted an impact assessment. Wow, what we found was astounding. We found that over the course of the time that we conducted the impact assessment, there were over 5 entrants that entered the market in the form of an owned company. So do you see that because we made the right decision, we made an informed decision, we're able to open up the market in a way that brought about 1, variety, 2, innovation, and 3, choice to customers needing any form of security in Botswana's market. So that is my response. I will rest today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dladla, for that informative response. And then maybe just to shift the conversation a bit, there's also another issue of increasing market power in Africa. So over the years, there has been evidence of increasing market power on the continent. And we have learned that when this is abused, it restricts entry and expansion of businesses. And looking at the various developmental challenges Africa faces as a competition enforcer, would we say that there is a moral obligation for African markets to be competitive? And on that note, I think I would allow, let me first invite Ms. Modungwa to just kick off this conversation on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Balisa, for that question. And my answer to that is yes. I agree that there is a moral obligation for African markets to be competitive, because competitive markets accrue benefits such as economic growth, increased productivity, innovation, supply of quality products, active rivalry that lead to lower consumer prices. And indeed, developing countries are characterized by high concentration and exercise of market power based on the studies that have been conducted. And you'll find that this is actually because of the the expansion of some transnational corporations that venture into business in developing countries as a way to enjoy economies of scale or even access to cheaper raw materials. And then in addition to that, you'll find that vertical integration compounds the problem in a way that now once the dominant players are vertically integrated, that gives the players an incentive, an ability to engage in exclusionary practices. What is a real challenge now becomes that even this conduct, it happens in sectors that affect the lives or the livelihoods of the people, or it goes down to the grassroots. I will take an example of even the retail industry, whereby you find that dominant supermarkets, which act as platforms that attract both customers, consumers, and producers. Now, due to vertical integration, they now venture into supply and distribution, or rather retailing of supermarkets branded food products, thereby competing with independent food products that now they provide the service of retailing or the platform service too. You'll find that the supermarket controls the channel to the distribution channel, and it has a mailer or a food producer as its customer. And again, at the same time, as the same mailer would be a competitor to the supermarket because of this vertical integration that now turns a customer to the supermarket to become a competitor in the downstream, where they when a supermarket has the store branded or in-house branded food products. That really causes a problem of entry and expansion because of the power, the economic power that the supermarket possesses of determining the cost of producing independent food brands, and then also the cost of retailing, and also they set the supermarket food product or retail prices. Thereby, it gives the supermarket a leeway to determine the margins of these producers. Now, considering that when they are vertically integrated like that, they have an incentive to actually engage in exclusionary conduct. That's when now the competition policy and act comes into, if they are enforced effectively, they can address such challenges and create competitive markets. But for developing countries like Botswana, you find that we need more than just competitive market. We need markets that can actually foster, that can actually be sustainable and have sustainable economic growth, and also inclusive growth, that is to bring into this global value chains that seems to be dominated by the dominant firms. Now, when you bring in other smaller market players into the value chain, that's how now the other market players are included. And you'll find that sometimes even the competition policy and law is not sufficient on its own. It needs to be supplemented by other policies such as the industrial and trade policies. And you'll find that some of the policies and law in most developing countries generally don't have competition objectives that relate to sustainable and inclusive development, which maybe then create a need for a stronger competition law that can be in existing competition laws to be enhanced to promote inclusivity and sustainable growth and development, because as the market are competitive, we want to see the benefit trickling down to even creation of employment, so that it has a long-lasting and a widespread impact in the economy. So also there's the issue of the developmental struggles that developing countries experience due to concentration requires to be handled. It requires, in my view, a collaborative effort and the enforcement or application of different policies that can actually create long-lasting and widespread impact in developing countries. Thank you, Bali.
Thank you. And maybe I can also ask if Ms. Ndubiwa and Ms. Dladla would like to add on the discussion and maybe reflect on this question.
Thank you. And also, I think just to also say that I think there's an obligation for markets to be, for African markets to be competitive, because of the benefits that the process of competition brings in any economy. We all know that the benefits of competition, and perhaps this is why countries are adopting competition law policies and laws in places, because where there's competition, there is lower prices, there are a variety of goods and quality goods and services, there's innovation, there is more choice for the public. And these outcomes are the ones that could help African countries to address most of its challenges. We realize that some of the challenges of African countries are poverty, are employment. And if markets are competitive, they will end up enhancing consumer welfare and will be able to address issues of poverty. They will be able to make the economics grow, as companies will be expanding and being efficient, and bringing more development to the economies. And in this process, where businesses are expanding and growing, we could address, as African countries, we could address issues of unemployment, because as they grow and expand, we could be assured at least of an improved employment, because this is one of our challenges also. We could also maybe bank on that to say that perhaps even our local markets, SMEs, informal markets, which are even comprised of mainly as women, we can be integrated into the value chains of the supply chains if markets were competitive, because now they could provide avenues for sort of this inequality will be addressed, avenues for perhaps all anchors of the society could be integrated into the whole value chains. And that is why I think the importance of the competition laws and policies comes in here, because where there's this freedom and there's a lot of benefits that's arising there that can boost the development goals of many countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ndubiwa. And Ms. Dladla, would you like to add something on that?
Yes, sure. If I may, Bali, and I think my colleagues have largely touched on the key, some of the key that I would have wanted to raise. But I think it's important to bring this question home to Botswana. When one looks at Botswana, the economy of Botswana, one, we're a very small population. Number two, traditionally, there are certain markets that have been concentrated. And you can imagine how any form of concentration would play itself out in a small economy such as Botswana's. What this essentially means, Bali, is that every time you get a merger, you run the risk of perpetuating concentration further. And that is why one really needs to be very careful about how certain concentrated markets are assessed. One of the pillars that we stand by, and one of the pillars that have really helped us to sort of open up some of these markets, particularly for inclusion, as Ndubiwa has already said, is our Section 52.2, which speaks to public interest. Mm-hmm. We have really used this section to try and align ourselves with government's broader economic inclusion imperatives. How do we do this? We do this by setting conditions that force the emerging parties to integrate within their value chains SMMEs and largely disenfranchised groups. This has really worked to our advantage, and we've seen positive results by just telling the emerging parties or directing the emerging parties to say, in such a segment, we want you to be supplied by local farmers. And we expect them to enter into supply agreements that will be properly vetted, that will allow, one, that there is entry of these SMMEs. Number two, there's sustainability. And when necessary, there's upskilling. So our law is very strong in that it allows for us to really stretch our muscle in as far as, dealing with this concentration that we see happening over time. But I think another point to raise, Bali, is that while we push for competitive markets, we need to constantly be aligning ourselves to government and what government's national interests are. Recognizing that at every given point in time, the competition law and policy on its own cannot stand the test of time. It can only be as good as it is supported by other pieces of legislation that make the process of competition fluid. So yeah, I think that's all that I can add from my side. Thank you, Bali.
Thanks. That's a very important points there. So now I think I'll hand over to you, Toby, to take us to the next question. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Balisa. It's such a great conversation. Thank you, ladies, for all this knowledge that you're sharing with us. So my fifth question for us is regarding the supranational planned competition authority by AfTA. So AfTA is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and there are plans in the works to have a supranational competition authority for the continent. And I always ask these questions in interviews. So when you ladies heard about this, I'm assuming you will have heard about it. What were your initial reactions to us having this one competition authority to oversee competition issues, cross-border issues? Were you excited? Were you sad? Did you think it was impractical? So I'll ask Ms. Tseladikae to give her opinion first. And maybe while you're talking, you can also suggest, at least for this competition authority, what the first point of call should be if we do go ahead to have the supranational authority. Ms. Tseladikae.
Thank you. For me personally, I believe it's a positive development, and it's quite welcome. I believe our African market is unique, based on the issues that we have as a continent. It's quite different from the, I'll say, developed continents, but our issues are specific to us. So this development and this new authority will deal with competition issues in relation to Africa and Africa's unique situations, unique markets, unique competition issues, and so forth. It will also reduce the elements of fragmentation in dealing with competition issues and investigation of issues, cross-border measures, cross-border cartel investigations, and so forth. That there'll be some form of unity. Is that the word? Unity in our investigations, in dealing with our measure reviews and assessment and so forth. So for me, it's a welcome development. Where should they start? I think the starting point for me will be capacity building, mainly because for some of us who consider themselves young authorities, we are limited in terms of funds, and because of that, there's maybe lack of capacity building. So if they can capacity build and resource build at continental level to make sure that at least to some extent we almost operate at the same level, even with the bigger authorities in the region. So for me, that would be the start. Capacity building from where to go to ensure that at the most we are almost, I doubt we can be at the same level, almost bring us to be at par in how we handle competition matters. Thank you.
Thanks for that response. Ms. Modungwa, are you as excited as Ms. Tseladikae about having this supranational competition authority for the continent?
Thank you, Olu. Yes, I am as excited. I support the plan to establish the supranational competition authority. To me, I consider it to promise a new competition model in Africa. That is a continental competition model, because currently we only have like national and regional models like COMESA and others. So the competition, the continental competition model has great potential to improve competition law enforcement and to ensure healthy competition in the continent. What I think we can benefit from this model as the Competition Consumer Authority of Botswana is with regards to training and information sharing and collaboration in investigating these cross-border practices that are prevalent in Africa because due to the cross-border trade and the presence of same companies in different countries. So I believe that this model will go a long way in improving the competition enforcement at national level, even at continental level. So I am excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dladla, would you like to respond to that question?
Yes, indeed, I would. My response would be slightly different from that of my colleagues. When I first learned about this very ambitious animal, the first thing that came to mind is, am I not going to be rendered redundant? Because, because at the moment I'm tasked with the regulation of mergers on cross-border transactions, and indeed transactions that are unique to jurisdiction. So the first really was, I'm really struggling to see how there's going to be the synchronization in the assessment of mergers relating to companies that are present in different jurisdictions. There is a uniqueness with all the jurisdictions where these companies play. And this uniqueness basically means that even the conduct of these companies in these jurisdictions might be different. So are we merely going to be reduced to, post men and post women, where at the supranational level we'll be given instruction to carry out some research and feed it back to it's just, it feels to me as though there's a significant level of disempowerment. And I would really like to see practically how this is going to work. I'm not against it, but I'm Thomas. I believe I want to see things happen in order for me to see that indeed they work. For me, for now, it's just an ambitious plan. I see what it's trying to do, but I think it's going to be very difficult to execute. And every country is going to try and protect its own policy, its own jurisdiction, and how it treats companies within a jurisdiction where they have control. So that's my feeling.
Thank you for that response. I guess most of us are Thomases. We all want to see this work before we really believe. Ms. Ndubiwa, would you like to add to, are you excited to have this supranational competition authority?
I will also, like Ms. Dladla said, I have mixed feelings about this. And at this point, I still have mixed feelings. I think it's because the regulations are not yet developed to spell out how the authority, the supranational authority, will be working with National Competition Authority. But to me, there are some uncertainties as to how this relationship will affect the resources of the National Competition Authority, which is already strained. I'm thinking that perhaps because of this development, there's going to be need to create another wing or a department or a unit that will be responsible for the implementation of the protocol in collaboration with the motherboard. I'm thinking of that, and I'm saying, where are we going to be getting all the resources that right now we are liking to be in? So I'm thinking of that to say it is going to create a cost for us, and who will bear this cost? That is because, like I'm saying, government is our funder, and there's limited resources that the funds that we get from government because of so many obligations that the government has to do. So I'm thinking of this to say, are we going to be creating another department? Also, there are some uncertainties as to the extent to which the supranational authority will take into considerations the public interest of member states in the enforcement of cross-border cases, because as national authorities, like my colleagues have been saying, we normally consider our public interest areas and see where we can create conditions that can help to address some of the concerns that we have in our respective market when enforcing the law. So I'm thinking, will this mother body be able to take the interest of Botswana into place, because they are unique to us when they are doing cross-border cases? But in the overall, I think it's a welcome development. It's only the fear of the unknown to say how will this thing is going to be unfold. And to me, it's a welcome development. Besides this uncertainties that I'm heavy, because it will strengthen our investigation capacities. As young agencies, we will be relieved of the burden of having to deal with complex transactions of multinationals, because this is always, we always have limited capacity to deal with these transactions because they are huge and always complex. So I am thinking again that this mother body will take away this burden from us and address this problem for us. So, and I think the first thing they should be looking into when they get in the office, the first thing I think when the office assumes its duty, it should ensure that all African states converge to the protocol or revise their laws and regulations in line with the protocol, because otherwise they'll be ineffective if each and every member state is going to enforce its own. Our laws are divergent, so then we need to come first to the convergent state before we can say we can enforce the laws at a supranational level. So this is the first assignment that they should be doing. We are at different levels of maturity and at different levels of implementing competition policies and laws. Some, even as we say, don't have competition laws. Some don't have competition authority. So I think they have a lot of work to do when they get in the office to make sure that we converge. It is important that we converge because we place a burden on investors as it becomes cumbersome for them to comply with different processes and rules. And this will act just against the spirit of investment and growth in the African market. As long as we are going to be acting in our isolations, we are going to be affecting investors. Investors will not want to invest in the environment where it's going to be bombarded by a lot of rules and regulations that are different to that they need to be complying with. So I think in terms of attracting investment, increasing competition, we need to remove all the barriers that could ike investors in order for the African continent to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very holistic response. So we're going to the last question. We're moving on to softer things, and we've been talking about a lot of technical competition issues. So I'll hand over to Balisa to walk us through that final question. Thanks, Balisa.
Thanks to everyone. And the last question is quite long, but I think this question is just to get a general view or advice for women that are in the competition space. And I think I'll open it up to all of you ladies. And I think one thing that we would like from this question is just to highlight certain things that women should be prepared for when coming into this field, and what helps you navigate this terrain, and what organization are you part of that support active women involvement in African competition space. With that, you can also speak to educational requirements, attitudes, mentorship opportunities available, networks that you belong to that can help others who are looking into pursuing their careers in this space. So I think maybe I can give a platform to Ms. Tseladikae to come in first on this one.
Okay, thank you, Bali. I will speak firstly with regard to Botswana, and say that for most of us here, including the male, any training specific to competition law, we did it internationally. There isn't that much growth with regards to competition law in the country, such that it's not yet offered by any local universities. So our training is postgraduate for most of us, and we did it internationally. That's that. But having said that, I would say that this is a highly technical area, and on top of that, it's very competitive, but I can't say there's any limitations to women. We are here sitting as 3 managers within the Competition and Consumer Authority, and with a director who's also female. So for us, what has set us apart, I would say, is our qualification. One has to be well qualified in law, in economics, in research, in that, and also you have to be quite a speaker, because there's a lot of engagement within the competition and consumer spaces in terms of research presentations that you may have to do internationally or locally or wherever. There's also international conferences that we attend, where you may find yourself as a panel member or having to make presentations on behalf of your country. But really, it's open if you are fully trained, if you are fully qualified. I can't say, I'll speak for myself and say I can't say I've been disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Tseladikae. And then Ms. Dladla, would you like to add something?
Yeah, like when Olu said this, we're moving on to the softer issues, I thought, well, we might be, but I think this is one of the most complex questions out of all the 6. But I think my colleague has summed it up. Our environment, we've never gotten the sense that it is gender specific, or it intends to promote a certain gender over another. For example, the head of our institution is female. There are 5 directors. Out of the 5 directors, there are 2 females. And I don't think there is any deliberate action by our human resource team to deliberately have more males than females. It's just as open as it is. It works on an exposure experience basis. But now that you've asked the question, personally, I'm not even aware if there are any networks out there besides this one that we are interviewing for, And this is why we are particularly excited about this, because we feel that for the first time, we can actually belong to a network that is women specific, that will support. We are mothers, we are married, we are this, we are that. We are not just coming to work to push competition. We've got households to man. Now, I don't know to what extent other jurisdictions are actually deliberate about supporting women, because they recognize the extra or added responsibility that a woman has to take on. And I think this is clearly this is the beginning of good things, and I hope that we can engage more as women to see how we further support each other. Goitse said it. I think one of the fundamentals to any discipline really is the extent to which that discipline is offered at grassroots. At university level, we are aware that there's a course called industrial economics, and competition is only but a subset of industrial economics. At some point, I think it was around 3-4 years ago, I sat on the board of the economics department at the University of Botswana with the aim to come up with a course that would be focused on competition law and policy. So this would be a very good starting point to just ignite a passion in women and males alike for the discipline, and hopefully get our people even go visit other authorities outside of Botswana for capacity building and come back and impart that knowledge in our authority. So yeah, that's my response.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dladla. And then I'll also take our last person, Ms. Modungwa, to come in.
Thank you, Bali.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my colleagues have summed it up. But what I can say is that being a woman working in this space I don't think is any different from working in any other technical space. And what I have noticed over the years is that one has to be a team player and be teachable or committed to lifelong learning, because this market is quite dynamic. Today, you can apply a certain, you can assess a conduct in a certain way, and you find that next thing, the markets have evolved from just being traditional in nature. Now they are dynamic. Now you have to also consider other aspects in your evaluation. So that requires to be on top of the developments in this industry. And other than that, currently, like Ms. Dladla has said, we don't belong to any organization. And so we actually receive mentorship from our colleagues, since we work in cross-functional, cross-divisional teams. So we share ideas, we brainstorm here and there whenever we need a fresh perspective on a certain aspect of the assessment at hand. So with that, I'll say that there is a lot of development that is needed in our country with regards to creating even awareness about working for the competition agency as a profession, because now since there is no training at grassroots level, like Ms. Dladla has already highlighted, you may find that even the knowledge that this is actually a career that one can pursue postgraduate, that knowledge may be limited. So I think it is our responsibility now as women in competition in Botswana to also see how we mentor and reach down to pull other young ladies who are coming behind us, so that they can also join the profession and be there to support them as others have supported us. Thank you.
Thanks. And then lastly, we can take Ms. Ndubiwa to add on the conversation. Thank you.
Although on my part, I don't have anything to say on this matter. I discussed this with my colleagues because to me, the questions is the most difficult out of all this. I was asking them why women and why not men? Because to me, in this field, we are faced with the same factors and issues. Us and men are seen with the same factors and issues to me. So I cannot say I can speak particularly of women because I don't know what is particular about women in this issue besides what my colleagues have pointed out. And even today, I'm not even a member of any organizations that support women in this involvement. I'll be highly interested to be part of that. Maybe that can open my eyes and shed some light into the matters I should look into as women, and perhaps be able to cultivate that culture in my own country in Botswana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ndubiwa. Over to you, Toby.
Thanks, Palisa. So we have come to the end of our conversation. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your views, your knowledge. It was an enlightening conversation for myself, and I hope that anyone that will watch this will also glean from this knowledge about how competition work is done in Botswana. And I wish the Botswana Competition Authority all the best in enforcing competition law and consumer protection in the country. Thank you very much, ladies, for being part of this conversation.
Thank you for having us. It was quite engaging. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Toby
Thank you
and
for the
Palisa.
platform, Olu and Bali.
Thank you and have a
everyone.
nice weekend. I wish you are here, could be taking you out for a weekend.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. I'm far away in Canada.
Great.